So talk about that was the music when you were a young boy, and now you start to get into your teenage years. Who were you starting to listen to? What was the music that was gaining your attention?
Oh, in my teenage years, it was a different story because I left my maternal family and went to my paternal family in Indianapolis. And in Indianapolis, my dad was quite young. He was 29 when I met him, and the weekends were filled with his record collection. That would be the Spinners, the OJs, and then living in Indiana, you had to hear the Jackson 5, and it was just all of the top soul bands from the period, and I got to see a lot of great concerts as well. So yes, I heard jazz, I heard B.B. King, it was a little bit of everything in the house.
Big difference in the move when from moving from Starkville, Mississippi to
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis, yeah.
Yeah, it was a big move for me because I was 10 years old. So you can imagine, 10 years old, country boy, accent. You can imagine how cruel the kids were in Indianapolis when they heard this country boy coming up. Didn't have a lot of confidence. I think that the move from my maternal family to my paternal family. I mean, from one day to the next, I met a whole family that I knew nothing of. I met a grandmother, 7 aunts and 3 uncles, just overnight. So it was quite a shock to me at that age.
And I'm sure a whole new set of rules that were totally different from what the rules you had been, under at home.
Oh, absolutely. My dad was a madman. He was out in the streets, and I came from, this structured upbringing with discipline and yes sir, yes ma'am. And I get to my dad, and my dad had a sports car he would drive. He was the fastest driver on the street. He would party, and it was just probably wasn't the best thing for a 10-year-old, but that's the way it was. So I had to take what I had.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So at what point? When did the singing really start? I mean, when did you find that you enjoyed this vocalizing?
Well, it started in high school, and I remember. Well, I used to sing with one of my best friends. I'd go by his house, and we'd sing Jackson 5, and we just harmonized. But none of us really thought much of it, But we'd sing the OJs, and we just do harmonies and things. And then one day I was in one of my classes in high school, and I was disturbing the teacher, and he shouted out to me to shut up. But he said, "But you do have a really nice baritone voice, so go see the choir director and tell him I sent you." And that was it. And I went and I joined the choir and ended up in a talent show just by chance, because there was this one of my school classmates. She was in the school talent show, and she was in a duo, and the guy pulled out at the last minute, and all of a sudden, I don't know how she found me, but she found me, and then next thing you know, I was singing in the talent show, and then I ended up singing in church a bit as a soloist, and I signed for the Marines. So there wasn't much entertaining that idea of a music career then, because I'd already sold my soul to Uncle Sam, so there was no getting out of that.
And was that something that you knew you wanted to do? And why the Marines?
Well, I loved the uniform. The recruiter would come to high school, and I would see that uniform. And I was in ROTC in high school, and I wanted, and he would sell this idea of you becoming your own man and traveling around the world and this, and I just thought it sounded attractive to me. So I asked my dad to sign for me at 16, and he signed for me, and I think I turned 17 in boot camp.
Wow.
So yeah,
wow.
He was just talking about seeing the world and all of that, and I wanted to get away from my situation. I mean, I knew that I wasn't really college material at the time, and my dad was too crazy, so I just needed to get away from there and be my own man, So that's what made it happen.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And where were you stationed during active service, and how long were you active service?
I was active service for 7 years. I spent a year in Southern California, Camp Pendleton. I was transferred from Camp Pendleton to Kaneohe Bay in Hawaii, where I stayed for 3 years. While in Hawaii, I was on a couple of Westpac, what are they called now? I would get on an aircraft carrier with my
Cruises?
battalion.
Like cruise, yeah.
the cruise sounds a little bit too much vacation for a Marine.
I get it. I have a good friend who was flying F-18s on those ships.
Yeah.
So
I did Southeast Asia a couple of times. Visited the Philippines, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and all these places. And then after 3 years, my contract, or if you like, my contract was up. And my life hadn't changed, and I didn't have any. I was infantry, so I wasn't really taught an occupation that I could really use. It was just like infantry. You could come out, you could be a cop, or you could do something of that nature.
Sure.
So I just decided to re-enlist and go from infantryman to a Marine security guard, which was the complete opposite. It was like the cream of the cream. I was on diplomatic duty, guarding embassies for 3 years. So then I was stationed I did my training in Quantico, Virginia, and I was stationed in Kinshasa, Zaire, in Africa for 14 months. And from there, I went to Paris, France, where I stayed for 20 years. I was served for 18 months, but I stayed there for 20 years. And that's where I took singing to another level.
Yeah, I get, but the singing sort of began while you were still in Africa. You kind of started to nibble, I guess. Is a good
nibble.
For it.
Yeah. I had a great nibble because one night, my wife is asleep, so I can tell this story. One night I was slow dancing with the lady on the dance floor, and I was singing in her ear, and she was like, "Oh, you have a really nice voice. I have friends who have a band. I'd like to introduce you to them." So she introduced me to this band, and with this band, I think that was one of my Marine buddies who had turned me on to Gil Scott-Heron. And I met the band, and I finally heard somebody that was in my vocal range. Gil Scott-Heron was a bass baritone, and I'm a bass baritone. So I gave these guys some songs. They learned them, and I started performing with them and getting paid for the first time.
Nice.
So when the move to Paris came, one of the Marines was taking piano lessons with a guy from Memphis, I believe he is, and I went and had a singing lesson with him, and he gave me a gig. He said, "I like your voice, get yourself a jazz repertoire together, and I'll book you." And I did, and the rest is history. I was off, and I knew that I had a way out of the military where I wasn't really happy. So I jumped at that opportunity, and I started singing before I got out. And when I got out, I had to go stateside to get out. I came straight back to Paris, and it just kept going. I kept driving.
Was there ever a thought of staying in the U.S. and doing the music there? Here?
You know what? The problem that I had coming out of the Marines and being in the Marines was I was sold the idea that the Marines was going to be one family, a green family, they called it. And when I got in and went through the few experiences that I had that were negative was all around racism. And the first time I saw a KKK cross burn was on a Marine base in California where I was stationed for that 1 year. So you can imagine the climate that was going on. And I was really disappointed with that. I didn't feel that vibe. I didn't get the vibe of family. So to be honest with you, when I got out, I didn't want to go back to America. I really didn't, because I was in Paris. Paris has a long history of how they've treated African-American musicians there with jazz and blues and everything. They've always been very supportive of musicians there. So I got there, and I got the love, and why would I go back? And I'd been away for a long time. I left the States when I was 17. I left the mainland probably at 18. I finished at 24. And there was no way I was going to go back. I'd never been to a place like Paris, and I loved it. I loved it. I fell in love with the lady, and there was no going back for me.
No. I had a feeling that was the backstory, but I was curious to hear if I was right. I was hoping it wasn't, but so because we're talking about what you were, in California during that time when that happened, the 80s.
No, we're talking late 70s. We're talking 70s. Okay. Yeah, we're talking 78. Yeah, like 78.
Okay. I guess we're, I'm 63, so I'm just trying to get a feel for, at that point, Yeah. So okay, that's
because I'm 57.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So
my life is not what I wanted. I didn't want to live. I mean, I'd gone through the same stuff in the States before I joined the Marines. Indianapolis is a very racist city. And I'd gone through that, man. I'm telling you. I mean, you just cannot imagine.
The first business trip I ever took in my business career, it had to be 1980. It was to Indianapolis,
Right.
and it was to the Delta Faucet factory. And I was a little kind of, I'm a New York guy. I was born in the Bronx, grew up on Long Island, was working in Manhattan, so guns is no big deal. But I was a little surprised to see all the shotguns in the trucks. But then when we went inside the factory, everybody was strapped.
Right.
Every worker was strapped, and I was just like, no, dude, everybody's got a handgun in this place. I mean, and I was like, okay, yeah, and it was and that would have been 84.
No, 84 I was getting out of the Marines. But,
for me, I would have been, it would have actually been, 1980. 1980, I guess, was when I was there. Yeah, 1980. So,
I mean, just to give you an idea of how the vibe was. I was in the Marines for 7 years, never had a gun pointed at me, and 4 years through high school, I had 5 guns pointed at me. Just to give you an idea of how violent it was.
Yeah.
So that was. I mean, I wouldn't go back to that. And Mississippi at that point was way back. It was like I was 13 when I left Mississippi, 12, 13.
Sure.
So it was there was no going home. Home was where I put my hat, as the song goes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you obviously built up a nice fan base. You began performing with people who were coming over there, Stan Getz, Sammy Davis Jr. to name 2, and then you you won a contest that allowed you to record your first single.
Yeah. I did.
That's always a huge boost to be able to have an opportunity like that come along. And then you continued, obviously, as you said, you're there and continuing to play, and a new opportunity came down the pike. But before we talk about that, tell us about "I'm Going to Bring Your Game Down."
Oh yeah, well, "I'm Going to Bring Your Game Down" I don't think it was inspired by a story that I lived in my last couple that I was in before I got married to my wife, who I've been with for a long time now. But I was in a relationship, and the woman had an affair with someone that was kind of in our circle that I kind of knew. And when I wrote that song, when I write music, when I write lyrics, I kind of think of other people that may have lived the same situation. To kind of speak to them. But in this case, it was sort of like a bitter song. It was kind of bitter on that because it kind of happened just like that. The guy was there. We were interacting before I knew what was going on. Then I knew what was going on. So when I wrote the song, this is what I was thinking. I was replaying that. I was thinking, okay, cool. I see you, you're sitting there thinking I don't know, but I know now. So what's up? So the song came from that.
That's pretty cool. I'm going to bring your game down from the deal, baby, Bruce Mississippi Johnson.